Well, thank you, and thank you to the ADA for inviting the group to come and talk to you about what some people may think is a very boring subject or not sexy. The Marrakesh Treaty was first thought of or approached in 2008, and I must admit I was one of those who said, to quote the film The Castle, "in your dreams." However, the dream has come true. Within 5 years, we managed to get a treaty that has come along, and as it's about 4 hours ago, we believe that Russia has just signed up or will be signing up, and that will now make 34 countries. The European Union, another 25, is just about there, so we're hoping that in the next year or two, each of those individual countries will do their regulatory issues, and that will then be 58 to 60. So we're probably a third of the way through all the countries in the world, so we'll be able to eventually have a global network. However, the network under Marrakesh may not have been needed if we could ensure that we had an accessible publishing concept. The concept of making a book accessible at the same time, on the same day, at the same price, is probably the dream I have as a person who is blind or vision impaired, who would be able to go into Dymocks or a public library and say, I'd like to read that book in audio because that's my preferred format. And one day that dream should be able to be achieved. I think technology has got to the point now where we are able to have that conversation. Probably one thing I should mention is that after lunch is always the hardest part to try and keep people's interest going. So I did think, well, maybe we could run the whole session with the lights off. And I thought, no, that probably would encourage too many people to think, but it would give equal access. And this morning I was listening to the conversations, and I must admit that it's probably one of the conferences I've been to where no one's turned around and said, well, up on the screen. So I'm very thankful for the presenters that we have had a good narrative, and they've explained their screen slides and so forth, except for the last video. However, those sorts of issues are all about access and making the world an inclusive place. The Australian sector, or the Australian copyright law, has looked after people who are blind or vision impaired or those in the print disability sector pretty well over the last 50 years. When Sam drew our attention to say that it was now 50 years since the copyright law came in, it kind of reminded me that it's 50 years since I last read a book, as in a printed book, because that was the year I lost my vision. But it's come a long way in that time. We've gone from recorded tapes, which were on go back in the 30s and 40s on gramophones. We've had six-track tape decks and so forth. We've had the new compact cassette. We've had CDs. We've now got the digital environment, and technically we can read a book within a reasonable time, providing it's published quite well. Whereas before, if you had a book published, it would probably take on average 2 years to go through the process of having it turned into an audio book or into a braille book. So it is important that we try and aim to have an accessible publishing model. I understand that that's a very complex world. The world of copyright is very complex, but we are able to, I think, with a bit of work, move forward and change all that. So with Marrakesh, as we said, there's 34 countries now. And at the moment, they've identified about, with the Accessible Book Consortium, they've identified about 300,000 books or titles that possibly could be exchanged between those 34 countries at this point in time. That's quite a large number. If you imagine these days in the global world of how many books are being published every day, or it's not just the big bestsellers that are the issue. But it would be good if we could end up with access in a timely manner, of which some of our speakers will talk about what the timely manner is. as I said before, I'm hoping that it would be in a very timely manner. The Australian Government and the Department of Communications now, and previously the Attorney General's Department, has been very consultative and very helpful to the print disability sector. I think we haven't had to work too hard to keep them in changing legislation to suit what we need and to ensure that some of our issues are resolved. However, it still is probably a long way from the point where we are able to get hold of the book and transfer it into Braille within a week or two. It still takes quite a bit of time of going through the process. It is easier, but it's still a process. So without much further, I could go on for a long time about the issues of the world that face our sector, but at the same time, I think having an inclusive sector is also probably the catchphrase that we should have. So I now introduce Sarah Runcie, who's now my second best friend, or never used to be my second best friend, but now she's my second best friend, so we'll be able to see what we're doing with the Publishing Association. Thank you.
I thought I was your best friend, actually, Tony, but okay. Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you, Jessica, for inviting us to talk about this issue. I just wanted to check, we've talked about 50 years of copyright. How long has the ADA conference been going?
The conference is only about its 7th year. The ADA has existed for about 20 years.
Right. Almost. And just checking, is this the first time publishers have spoken at the ADA? No. No? It's good to talk together, isn't it? I just wanted to quickly talk about the history of what I think has been referred to as the Marrakesh Treaty Forum. We're now calling it the Australian Inclusive Publishing Initiative. And I'll explain why. But back in 2014, I had a conversation with then Fiona Phillips of the Australian Copyright Council, and she introduced me to the issues of accessibility and the Marrakesh Treaty. From there, I had conversations with Libby Bolsh at the Copyright Agency, then Anthea and Michael Simpson at Vision Australia, and from there, conversations spread more broadly to many people in the print disability sector, the library sector, and government, and of course authors, and of course the ADA. The last forum that we had included Arts Access Australia, Australian Blindness Forum, the Council, of course, ADA, ALIA, the Australian Society of Authors, Blind Citizens Australia, of course, Copyright Agency, which assisted and supported that, Read How You Want, which is an Australian publisher that has been going for some time that is specialised in accessibility. Of course, the Round Table and Neil Jarvis, RIDBC, the Royal Institute of Deaf and Blind Children, the Royal Society for the Blind, and of course Vision Australia. And most recent additions included our agents, literary agents and editors. I guess the reason that I wanted to mention all the people that are involved is to give you an idea of the complexity of the system that we have currently in producing accessible format. There are many, many working parts to the accessibility system, if I can call it that. Perhaps ecosystem is better. And it was, and no one person had, or no one body, no one organisation had an overview of all that was happening or not happening in the sector. So the aim was to bring everybody together so that we could have an understanding and an overview of what each drove us and what each of us did and how we could make one another's lives easier. And just to give you an example of the kind of simple conversation that had not happened, recently we started a project called Embedding Accessibility in the Publishing Workflow, which aims to get in the most efficient way the requirements of accessibility into the digital workflow of publishers, so that they're not, as so often happens, retrofitted, which is quite an expensive and difficult process at times, particularly when you're talking about multi-format material. And particularly multi-format material that educational publishers produce. So the conversation that had not happened was that the publisher that we're working with and a Department of Education that had been using their material for years, they hadn't ever sat in the room together. And they hadn't actually ever had the conversation as to what kind of file type the department would like to get from the publisher. Over the course of their many years of receiving files from this particular publisher, the people in the Department of Education, in order to produce an accessible format publication, had cut and pasted from one file into another. And they'd been doing that for years. And all because nobody had asked the question, what file would you like to get this in that would make it easier for you? Now, if you multiply that, one small instance across this vast system that produces accessible format for students, you understand actually some of the delays and why conversations like this are so important. So we brought everybody together in a room and we hashed a few things out, and we decided that we needed to do some projects together. And since our first forum in 2016, we have initiated over 10 projects, some of which have come to completion. In fact, there's one that the Copyright Agency, ADA, and the Copyright Council have been working on in relation to copyright guidelines and the Marrakesh Treaty for users. There are many other projects that we've been working on in terms of the very sexy topic of metadata and supply chain. Because in fact a lot of the issues around accessibility really are not copyright issues at all. They're logistics, they're supply chain, and they're looking for cost efficiencies. And that way we can move towards a system that is more timely, more cost efficient, and therefore getting closer to Tony's dream here, because being born accessible ultimately makes sense. Makes sense in the dollars and cents terms as well as making sense in terms of overall systems and really the social need. I guess to just to sort of finally say that there is a lot to go in terms of achieving accessibility. And the dream now is to be inclusive publishing and born accessible. But we have a long way to go, but we hope that we will get there. And the only way that we can do that is collaboratively. And I think that we have a unique opportunity in Australia right at the moment to achieve a solution that doesn't adhere to legacy divisions within either the print disability sector or the libraries or commercial publishing and so on, but to find the right drivers and the right formula, I think, in moving forward in achieving accessibility in Australia. Thank you.
We'll save the questions till after, and I'd like to now introduce Anthea to give an overview of what Vision Australia does and also what the global look is at the moment with Marrakesh. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony, and again, like everybody else, thank you to the ADA for inviting me and my colleagues along, but also a huge thank you to everybody who advocated, who lobbied, who put their heart and soul into the Marrakesh Treaty, because we wouldn't be here today talking about it if that hadn't happened. So thank you to everybody. Give yourselves a pat on the back. just a little quick overview, just to put it into context and perspective of why this is important. For Australia, there are over, added up, over 3 million people with a print disability. So we're not talking about just a small amount. The blindness and low vision, but the wider print disability community for dyslexia, for arthritis, for even dementia, which with an ageing population is going to become quite prevalent in our society. And I've got a slide here called Marrakesh to Murrumburra. People might think, Murrumburra, why is this important? You know, it's only 107 kilometres from Canberra, 346 kilometres from Sydney, 17,779, you can tell I'm a librarian because I like the detail, from Marrakesh. At Vision Australia, we have a client who lives in Murrumburra. They get to benefit from the Marrakesh Treaty. Doesn't matter where in the world they are, if a country has ratified the treaty, the clients, the citizens, the residents of that country will get to benefit. So putting the treaty into action. Vision Australia, we were very lucky. We were the first organisation, along with the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, to do a symbolic exchange on the 30th of September 2016 when the treaty came into force. I think Australia was around about number 10, number 15 in ratifying, but we had to wait until Canada and then they've got all the accolades for being number 20 to ratify, but we're very grateful to them. But even to get that started, it was a collaborative effort. It was the Department of Communications, the World Intellectual Property Accessible Book Consortium, which I'll talk a little bit about soon, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind and Vision Australia. And even to do that with being all over the world, trying to get time zones to have meetings about this was impossible. So for me, it was a lot of very early mornings or very late nights, and the same for Canada and the same for Geneva. But everybody was committed to it. And I don't think I've worked on anything where there has been such commitment and passion across the globe for the Marrakesh Treaty and to get it up and running. So for Vision Australia, with the treaty, we have exchanged, well, when I say exchange, we have from CNIB, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, we have taken over 800 of their titles that we wouldn't have been previously able to get, that we didn't have, and we couldn't buy them and we couldn't produce them. This has generated so far in excess of 17,000 loans to our clients. I think, yes, and I get very excited, and ABC are very excited about that. And sort of roughly, that would, if we had produced those books into either audio, and predominantly audio, and even Braille, that would have cost us around about $600,000. As a for-purpose, not-for-profit charity, we don't have that $600 to spare. So again, there are the economic benefits. We are a member of the Global Book Service, as I said, I will talk about that. We also have exchange agreements with other countries outside of the Accessible Book Consortium. I don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. We will exchange with anybody. We just want to be able to build our collection to provide our clients with equal access to as many books, as much information as possible. As I said, it would have cost us $600,000 to produce those books. So it is a return on investment because we have acquired 100 books, we produce books, other agencies, other organisations will be able to acquire as well. So for every book that we produce, we might take one from Canada, we might take one from the Central Library for the Blind in Israel. It's cost us maybe $700 to produce one book, but now we've actually got 3 books for the price of one. And our CFOs love that. So I said, it's about increasing the collection, the titles, the genres and the subjects, but also importantly, the languages. As Australia has many emerging and diverse communities, we want to be able to provide access to books, to reading, to information for all of our communities. This is going to enable us to build on those collections, which previously we might have only had 10, 20 or 100 in particular languages. Now we can actually diversify that, which again I think is just a brilliant thing to be able to do, and to be able to go to and talk with the communities, talk with the community leaders to let them know that we have got these resources. It also means that previously we could only produce titles that weren't available in the mainstream commercial, weren't available as mainstream commercial. Whereas now, because of the treaty, it's about producing into the format that the client, or our client, requires, or for the treaty, for that individual. So now, if we cannot buy it in an accessible format, we can produce it, or we can exchange it. Our preference, as naturally, is to exchange. That will free us up to produce other books that might not necessarily see the light of day as an audio book. As Sarah spoke about, we were also involved in the Australian Inclusive Publishing Initiative, and as one of the participants, that has been absolutely brilliant. Our last meeting in November or December last year, it was so engaging that I think we all came away just absolutely pumped, because we felt that it was so positive and everybody wanted to work together. So they've all become my second best friends. We are also looking at a working group with visibility, the Australian Blindness Forum, the Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children, to work with the National Library and our national catalogue, the Libraries Australia, to ensure that all our catalogues are available through that. So anybody, and then that will feed through to Trove, so any member of the public can see what's available in accessible formats, which library has it, what the format is, to be able to share. And this is what, getting back to that, being able to share it. There is also preparation for a guide for librarians, and that's being prepared by the International Federation for Library Associations and Institutions. And that's come about because there's the World Blind Union with Oxford University published a book that has a lot of legality into it. The Electronic Information Frontier has a guide, but we thought, oh, actually, there's not really a guide for librarians. So a bunch of librarians, we've got together and we're producing a guide, trying to keep it simple so that when a country does ratify, the libraries, who are the main users of the treaty, don't think, oh, this is all too hard, because it's not. I think last year, Jessica and I presented at IFLA, and what we started off saying, there actually is no rule book. But we're making guidelines, and really we want it to morph, we want it to use, we don't want it to be so restrictive that people go, oh no, we can't possibly do that. So far it's been a fantastic journey. So just a little bit about the Accessible Books Consortium. It was established in June 2014, and the idea was to bringing books to persons with print disabilities. It is facilitated by the World Intellectual Property Organisation and has a large number of stakeholders, from rights holders, the publishers, and also as members. And that's why I'm on the board as a member, in that we actually do use that service. It has three main activities: the capacity building, inclusive publishing, and the global book service, which is what I will talk about. So it's free. Again, for an organisation, there is no cost to join. And essentially, it is an online catalogue of the accessible books that we as organisations have produced ourselves in Braille, in audio, when I say audio, DAISY, so the navigable audio, and giant print. But it also has Braille music as well, which is a very important thing internationally because there's a lot of call for that. So with that, we have over 365,000 titles and over 5,000 music scores in 76 languages. It enables the cross-border exchange of these books. We check the catalogue to identify and request the books. We're very lucky in that WIPO and through the ABC, they actually provide an officer to do the permission checking for the organisations whose countries haven't ratified Marrakesh. But for my organisation, for the CNIB, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, and also the Central Library for the Blind in Israel, we don't have to go through that palaver of having to wait for permissions, waiting for publishers to get back to them, or territorial rights blocking a permission. As long as we've been through the due diligence process, we have checked for commercial availability, we can just request the book or the format, whatever it is, and it's sent to us. So we've actually got rid of a lot of red tape, and that's why we've been able to benefit so well for it. So just to finish up, I've called this the Marrakesh Treaty, the Global Book Service, and a boy named William. This is putting it into a real-life situation. At the beginning of this year, we had a request from a parent of a client asking us for a book, and it was Alistair MacLeod's Islands Collected Stories, because William was needing it he was about to start VCE. I thought, oh, okay, we don't have it, we'll see what we can get it. It wasn't available in audio format at all in Australia, so we couldn't interlibrary loan. It wasn't available we thought it might have been available to buy for the parents, so we sent off a link to that. Unfortunately, there was geo-blocking there and couldn't buy it. Our next step, we went to the ABC catalogue, and lo and behold, CNIB had it. By the next day, we had the book in our library service. William is now reading it in preparation for going back to school. And if that's not a win-win situation, I don't know what is. So thank you for listening.
Denise is now going to tell us what's happening in the West with visibility. As some as you may be aware, Western Australia is another country just across the Nullarbor, and they do things not necessarily slightly different, but maybe a bit more creative, maybe not, and we'll see how we go. Thank you.
And thank you very much for the opportunity to come and present, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you for listening. How are you guys doing this afternoon? Are we around, awake? A show of hands, please. Fantastic. People at the back, brilliant. They're all awake. This is what happens when you are given what I call the graveyard shift in presenting, just after lunch, but I think we've done really well. Thank you. Anthea. So look, I think Anthea talked about some of the context, the Australian context around why that countries and especially people within a country should come together to share the material that we have, okay? If you look at the numbers, you know, they just speaks about the issue that we currently have. The key point I want to get from this slide is, just imagine the situation in the countries that do not have access, do not have an internet, do not have material converted. You know, by us supplying material in an accessible format through ABC, we can actually enlighten these people, give them access, because information is power. If you don't have information, you cannot move ahead in life. You cannot have access to education. You cannot be successful in life. So look at, it's not a one-way street. It's not only Australia getting books into Australia. It's about how we can supply books to other countries who ratify the treaty. So I got 4 more slides to go, and I think we are doing really well for time, and there'll be a bit of time for question and answers. So look, again, we talk about books, but I think it's really important to look at, the websites as well. A lot of us have access to internet, but a lot of the websites do fail the accessibility test. I know it's a little bit out of scope from my presentation. My presentation is around how do we do things at ground level, but I think it's really important to understand, given that we got this large captive audience, if I don't put a plug in for that, I think I'll be failing in my duties. Okay, so I think next button is what I need. Okay, we got there. Look, Anthea talked about the process, how easy it is now to access a material, a book, in the format that's requested by a client. We get a large number of requests from the client base we have, roughly about 5,000 requests for books from the client base that we have in the Wild Wild West and in Tasmania and some parts of Australia. I just had a chat to my librarian, and she said, Dinesh, it now takes about 10 minutes to download a book because they have made the engine, the ABC engine is called Tiger. Through Tiger, if the title is available in the format that you're looking for, it just takes about 10 minutes because we can use the file transfer protocol to transfer the book directly to our system, and then it's available to be downloaded and distributed to the person that requested it. So look, we do make sure that we are not duplicating our efforts. So we look at the repositories through Vision Australia, through State Library of WA, where we have a very collaborative organized connection, Trove as well, and we look at local repositories. If it's not available, then we look at ABC. Is the book available? Is it in the right format? And how quickly can we get? And that entire process, if it's available, does not take more than 10 minutes, right? So it's a really, really good process that has been introduced. And I really like to congratulate the people who actually pioneered that piece of work. And look, we need more countries to ratify. So, my New Zealand colleagues, where the bloody hell are you? So sorry, I don't know whether they're here, but they need to, you need to, sign up. So like Anthea, we did a lot of B2B testing. We've spent, again, just like Anthea's organization, lots of long hours because of the time differences, time zones, undertaking this testing. And we have actually exchanged a large volume of books that are available. These titles are cleared from a publisher perspective. They are available for immediate download. About 5,000 odd titles are available. They do not have any restrictions. And since implementation, the number 100 here in my slide sounds smaller, but the number of people that benefit, it's the number of titles, but the number of people benefit, it's quite large, quite extensive. Last year when I looked at the stats from the library, about 80,000 titles were borrowed by our consumer base. So there's a huge, huge demand for accessible books. And, we get requests outside the agreement from various other libraries as well. So I just have noted some of them as well. And CNIB, thumbs up. There's quite a large volume that are currently available in the format that we are looking for. Now I might be breaching copyright with this. So look, I'm putting it out there, guys. I've taken a photocopy of a website and planted it up there just to show you how easy it is with their search engine to narrow your search to find the material looking for in the format, in the language, by the producer, by the publisher, and it comes up. So I just typed in James Bond, and here's all the available titles that have come up, and you can get it in Daisy Audio, in Braille, and Sarah talked about born accessibility, and if the publishers can produce material in EPUB 3, which is the next generation from Daisy, then I think we are that much closer to eradicating this issue of somebody having to narrate and convert it, right? So there's still a lot of room for us to move forward, but I think we are we have taken a step in the right direction. Look, challenges and opportunities. Again, I've talked about this. Anthea talked a lot about this. One of the issues we have is, if, for instance, when I ask my librarian, so what about the non-restricted ones? She says, Dinesh, the issue is, you make a request and you don't get any notification, and it can be sitting there for months, and it's not a reflection on the actual system. It is that the countries take a long time to get the clearance from the copyright holders. There are requests that we have made, about 2 years ago. We're still waiting for that material to come through because somebody has requested. So you can see how it can disadvantage the person who requested it. So look, it is a great step forward. I started this role about 4 years ago, and we were just in the initial stages, but now with more and more countries ratifying and coming into the program, we will have more and more access to books, and then we will be eradicating the global book famine and the cross-border issue with the books that we have. So look, we've come to the end of my presentation. I just have one more plug. Look, so in Australia and New Zealand, we belong to a group called the Roundtable for People with Print Disabilities. And every year we run a conference. This year the conference is in May in Sydney. And if you want to know about some of the challenges, issues, and some of the things we are doing, please feel free to come to the conference. We got international speakers. It's a 3-day event, and you get what I take away from conference is the opportunity to network and to find out what's going on. So if you want more information about the conference, talk to myself, Sonali at the back there, and we would like to see a lot of people participate in that conference because it's a group of print disability organizations that get together, and we try to look at some of the issues, and we are try to resolve some of the issues that we have. So the invitation is there. Take the opportunity. As somebody said, if you wait, the bus is going to leave. So get on board and make this place a better place for the people with a print disability. And thank you so much for listening today.
Well, thank you. We've got a few moments left for some questions. I'd just like to point out that when you hear those figures of how many downloads and how many, we are not the pirates of the book industry. We're a library, and just like any other library operates and borrow books and so forth. So the other thing to bear in mind is that due to the print disability issues and also the impact of blindness and low vision, is that a lot of people get a lot of enjoyment from reading audio books and braille books and so forth. So we believe that we read a greater number of books compared to the average person. And in some cases, some of our older people who are blind or vision impaired can listen to books for up to 6 to 8 hours a day. So it's a huge amount of content that we have to have ready to try and satisfy their needs and so forth. So any questions? Don't all jump at once.
Sorry, so it's the round table on information access for people with print disabilities. I will talk to you after the conference and I'll give you the details. Thank you.
And I might add a plug for the fact that I'll be there doing a workshop on the copyright aspects and talking about the guidelines that we're developing with the Copyright Agency and Australian Copyright Council. So there will be copyright discussion going on there.
No other questions?
I wanted to ask something of the panellists kind of as a group and see if they had a response, which was some of you were involved in the collaborative process before the reforms happened, and all of you have been working on the collaborations after. How much do you feel like things have changed over the last, say, 5 years in terms of the way people are working together and those kind of things? What have you seen in terms of change?
I think from my point of view and also as a consumer, I think the amount of content has got the potential to go forward greatly. I think collaboration, I think we finally got, I think going digital is what brought a lot of it together, and I think also some of the information disruptors such as Google and all those others have also in some ways assisted that the change had to come. So I think it looks a bright future, I think, for print disability and what we're able to get in the future.
I think I've got a big enough voice.
Oh.
I think, yes, Jess, there's definitely been a shift in the collaboration. Definitely been a shift in the collaboration to the positive. I've been in this field for print disability for nearly 5 years, and I can say I have observed that, and I've been part of that during that time. And as I said in my presentation, the engagement and the collaboration coming from the initiative, the inclusive, now I've got to think what we're calling ourselves, the Australian Inclusive Publishing Initiative, was just amazing. The first meeting the previous year, there was a bit like the elephant in the room. We were all sizing each other up and trying to work out, you know, what were you there for, and what, oh, if we did this. The second meeting was like we were having a reunion of best friends. And everybody really does, I think now, has that commitment, because there's been a lot of talk and media attention to the Marrakesh Treaty and also the disability exceptions for the reform in the Copyright Act. So I think it's brought it to the front, and people, it's not that scary. It can be done. Let's work together.
Look, I totally agree, and there is a lot of collaboration between the blindness organisations within Australia. I would like to, as I said in my slide, so about 22% are print disabled in Australia, blind and vision impaired add up to about 5%. So there is that 17% that I have found with the introduction of the NDIS. There is a little bit of hesitance to join, but I think it's after the implementation of NDIS, I think organisations will know where and what their market share is, and then there will be much more collaboration with the other print disabled organisations. That's how I feel, and that's what I have seen in Western Australia, and I think you can extrapolate that to the rest of the states here in Australia. So definitely there is a lot of collaboration. There are 4 or 5 providers here in this room. In the blindness sector, we collaborate, fairly well, I believe, I think. I like to think so. Yes, we do. Yes, there's a lot of nod, and we do. And we have to work harder to bring in the other print disabled organisations so that we have a larger collective voice. 4-5 million is quite a sizable number.
I don't think I can really give an answer to exactly that question, but I know that when I first started working on this issue, I became very quickly aware of the fact that most people were not talking to one another. And as an example of where this collaboration is yielding some very direct and positive results, one project that we're working with the libraries on is to collect all the information as to what is currently available in accessible format and what that format is in all the different print disability libraries, which has not happened before. And that's an obvious thing that should happen, and indeed could have happened long before the Marrakesh Treaty became the catalyst to a lot of these conversations. So I think that whilst we talk about timely, I think in many respects what we're doing now has been long overdue, and I'm hoping that our collaboration will increase. And dare I say it, perhaps even exponentially.
Thank you. Well, I think we've... one more.
Thanks, Tony. It's Sue McCarricker from the Australian Library and Information Association. I just wanted to pay tribute to the work that the Australian Publishers Association has done in creating the Australian Inclusive Publishing Initiative, having been to both the 2 meetings, and I would say a personal tribute to Sarah Runcie, who's really pulled it all together. So I think the reason that we're all talking so well about this alliance, I can't agree more with Anthea that we're all in the room, we're all very excited about this. Sarah, thank you so much. You've really pulled this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Undeserved.
Well, thanks for listening to us, and I'd just like to point out that most of the blindness agencies, libraries run on well over 50% of public donated money, so that's how we survive and how we manage and provide services to our clients. I'd also like to put out a request to, a lot of discussion today was saying how we were going to digitise culture and history. Digitisation by taking a photograph doesn't increase accessibility for the people with print disabilities. So if we're able to, when you do think about using those, digitising rather than using just a camera to digitise it, and I'm sure it's going to present another copyright issue, use OCR software to take the photograph with, and then other than handwriting, at least it should be then saved in an accessible format so it can be read by a screen reader and maybe moved into Braille and so forth. So I think whilst we're talking about accessibility, it does apply in many, many different ways. It's not only just the format of the book or how the book's produced or how the title, it's the content of how it's produced. The same with audio description of photographs and so forth. You can tell a picture tells 1,000 words, but unless you can put some context to that, it means nothing to our community. I think previously we heard a reference to Netflix. Netflix being the American company that now is the born-again Christians to do with the fact that they provide audio description with all their shows. However, they forget to tell you they were taken to court, and that's the only reason they do it. So it's a matter of changing the culture of the community and also the business sector to make it an inclusive world. I mean, there's 20% of people with disabilities within Australia. The NDIS is changing the world of a lot of people other than the people who are blind or vision impaired. It will give opportunities for them to participate in reading content and viewing material and so forth. If it's provided in an accessible format to them, they'll be able to enjoy it and get a greater social experience. So thank you.